guys know that I relieved Steve Wilks from his duties this morning as our defensive coordinator. Chris Harris will actually be assuming those duties right now, and I'll be helping him as he progresses through the week as our coordinator, and everybody else will stay the same. This decision that I made late last night, and I talked to him this morning, and I felt like it was the best decision for the organization at this time. And I've said this all along, that I'm evaluating players, I'm evaluating coaches, I'm evaluating myself, and I just felt like this was the best decision for right now.
It is Jets' final drive. He is Zack Rosenblatt. I am Connor Hughes, coming to you here on Black Monday because the first coaching transaction that the Jets have made after this dismal season went down just a few hours ago. Steve Wilks, formerly this team's defensive coordinator, has been relieved of his jobs, as you just heard Aaron Glenn say. Zack, welcome to the show. I guess this was kind of something we all thought was eventually going to come, but now it's kind of unique that it actually has.
Yeah. You know, I didn't expect it to come before the end of the season. I mean, the way Aaron Glenn had been talking up until yesterday really was kind of like, we're going to give Steve Wilks a chance, and then we're going to evaluate everything at the end of the season. But, you know, when you give up, I think it was something like they let the Jaguars score in 8 of 9 drives to start the game. That's kind of when you reach a territory where it's like, all right, maybe it's time to make change. And we'll get into, like, our opinions and everything on that. I was surprised, though. And, you know, at the end of the day, Steve Wilks is a guy that's been one and done at almost every stop, which is kind of crazy. It's crazy, especially because I don't think anybody really dislikes Steve Wilks. I think he's pretty well liked, actually. So I guess he's just not a good football coach. But, it's, this is the product of a 3-win season, and people are going to lose their jobs, and now Chris Harris is going to get a chance to prove that he deserves it.
We are going to get to so much today, as Zack alluded to. Obviously, the news of the day is Steve Wilks losing his job, so we're going to get into why, how this happened, the surprise factor of it all. That's going to be a big part of this. Also, we are going to talk a little bit about that disaster of a game that the Jets experienced down there in Jacksonville, 48-20, the final score. Trevor Lawrence actually made NFL history against the Jets defense there with a quarterback GAMI stat line I saw on social media, which is pretty crazy. But before we get to any of that, we do want to thank you guys for wherever you are watching the show, whether that is X, Facebook, SNY.TV, or YouTube. The place to be before we get into the nitty-gritty of this thing, as we always say, is YouTube, because you can interact with us throughout the duration of the show. Also subscribe to SNY's YouTube channel while you're there, because aside from getting us here on Jets Final Drive, you get Jets Mailbag, you get Jets pre- and post-game clips with the guys there. And also, it's basketball season, so Ian Begley has you covered with the putback and everything you need to know about the Knicks and the Nets, but no one cares about the Nets, so we're mostly going to focus there on the Knicks. Before we get into everything, though, Zack, we're going to start with the segment that we start every single show with. It is What Have We Learned, presented by Monmouth University. Monmouth University, the greatest university in all of the land. I'm going to have to trademark that before they do, so at least I can get some kind of a cut off that. Zack, I'm going to start with this one. I know I usually let you go first, but I'm going to do this one. So you guys know I cover both the Jets and the Giants. I tallied it all up as far as the firings that I've dealt with this year from these two teams. We are up to 1 head coach firing, 2 defensive coordinator firings, 1 assistant defensive line firings, 2 quarterback benchings. So that is 6 total transactions of people who have lost their jobs. Zack, the combined win total for both teams, 5. So 1 more person has lost their job than these 2 teams have combined wins this year. That is the state of current New York football. Absolute disaster. What about you, my friend?
I mean, I would say, just to tie it into what we're about to get into, I'd say I learned that Aaron Glenn is willing to admit where he made a mistake. And, it was a mistake that he made, but at the end of the day, he realized that this defense was not improving, and so he fired the defensive coordinator, and now the pressure is going to be on him to pick the right one or fix the defense. But I think the fact that he's done this, he's benched Justin Fields, he's benched guys for not playing well, he's cut guys for fumbling the ball away, and so I think there's something to be said, at least like the accountability thing that was always such an issue. Like I don't think that's an issue anymore necessarily, but they have a lot of other issues. Obviously, that's why they're this bad.
All right, let's get right into this one now, Zack. A little bit more detailed, I should say, specifically with Steve Wilks and this show. Here's my thing on Wilks, man. I am slightly surprised by it. I am. And the reasoning for me being surprised that the Jets decided to fire Wilks is just because of how Glenn had spoken about Wilks leading into this point. I mean, he pointed, it wasn't too long ago, that he looked back and essentially said, look, I was in this guy's shoes. I was the first-year coordinator for a team. Obviously, we know Wilks has been a defensive coordinator before, but still, first year with a new program, trying to instill confidence when he was defensive coordinator of the Lions. The team was a complete and total disaster, and everyone and their uncle in Detroit was crying for Aaron Glenn to be fired. Fire Glenn, fire Glenn. He's awful, he's awful, he's awful. Dan Campbell stood by his guy. He stuck with him, and eventually what happened was the Lions went from a 3-win team to a 9-win team to a 12-win team to a 15-win team, in large part because of Aaron Glenn's defense. And you had that whole culture of accountability and culture of turnaround where it was Glenn running the defense, Ben Johnson on offense, and then Dan Campbell was your CEO. There are some similarities there, but I think the similarities die with just, hey, everybody wanted this coordinator fired and we stood with him. Because that's the only comparison that you can make. Because Glenn took over a Lions defense that was so void of talent that it was always going to take a while for them to get their players in and then make a run and then turn this thing around. The Jets' defense wasn't void of talent. I mean, the whole thing that they were banging the drum on in the front office last year and ownership last year and management last year was that these general manager and head coaching vacancies were going to be so appealing to prospective head coaches and prospective general managers because of the talent that was already there on the roster. Glenn took a defense that was widely viewed as one of the better in the NFL the last 3 years, ever since the first year of Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich, and made it unrecognizable. 20th in yards allowed per game, 30th in points per game. They have the third fewest sacks in the NFL. They have 3 total turnovers, and I'm pretty sure only one of them was actually forced by the defense because the other 2 were on special teams. 0 interceptions, an NFL record. You have players that were at one point viewed as defensive cornerstones like Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald and Quincy Williams looking like guys that should be replaced this offseason because McDonald looks completely out of his mind on the field and has sacks in only 3 games. Jermaine Johnson, 3 in only 11 games. And Quincy Williams allowing 3 touchdowns this past Sunday. I mean, it's become an unrecognizable disaster. And I don't know how much longer you could potentially stick with Wilks. So this move to me, while surprising just because of what Glenn had said, when you really get into the nitty-gritty of it, it was probably 100% coming, probably necessary, and finally at this point was actually evoked and the change was made.
Yeah, I don't think a couple weeks ago Aaron Glenn planned to fire him. I really do think these last couple weeks spurred it into right now. The Dolphins game and this game, they were a complete disaster. Like I said, they gave up scoring drives on 8 of 9 drives to start this last game. They gave up 34 points, I believe, to the Dolphins. They've given up 30 or more points, I think, 4 or 5 times this year, which is something they pretty rarely did with the previous regime other than that first year. So, the difference between this first year and that first year with Saleh was like that Saleh year was a lot of young guys, a lot of rookies, things like that. This is a lot of like random veterans that they've picked up off the street or guys that were holdovers from the previous regime who were not playing up to their potential. So, I don't blame Glenn for firing him, like I said, because it was heading this way anyway, and you get a chance to look at Chris Harris. But, we've talked about this. The development wasn't there in terms of the guys on the team. I think they did do a good job with some of the guys they brought in, but not to the point where, like, I'm not going into next year being like, oh, yeah, we have a potential star in our hands at this position. I don't see any potential stars right now. I don't see guys that look like no doubt 100% this guy's going to be a contributor on a playoff contender, and that includes Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald and Jamie and Sherwood. And I think that's obviously a problem. Talent is a problem that Wilks was not able to overcome. I think there are some great coaches that can overcome a lack of talent through clever schematics and putting guys in position to succeed, and they just weren't getting that. And so at the end of the day, you saw players and the way they were talking or weren't talking yesterday, like they were starting to sound like guys that were kind of like not believing that they were getting put in position to succeed. So, this was surprising, but not surprising at the same time.
I mean, it was a disaster of a performance, this game against the Jacksonville Jaguars, one like we haven't seen in a while. The Jets are 30th in points per game, but they're allowing over 35 points per game in their last 3, low-lighted by that 48-point thromping that the Jaguars just gave them. I mean, literally, like I said, Trevor Lawrence is the first quarterback in NFL history to throw for 330 yards and have 5 touchdowns without throwing an interception. He had 51 rushing yards and another touchdown on the ground. I think Trevor Lawrence is a fine quarterback in the NFL, but I mean, he literally was looking like the best quarterback to ever live against the Jets. And I think that's what's so... I know the excuses that people can point towards, Zach, because the one thing that everyone's going to say is that, Robert Saleh's defense, his first year in the NFL, they were ranked last in yards per game and points per game, and they jumped all the way up to 4th in the league in both of those 2 categories. Once they got their players, the players learned their scheme, and things started to turn their corner. I don't know. I mean, I can't view a player like Quincy Williams, who was an all-pro, who now looks like somebody that is just a complete and total liability on the field. Will McDonald, who was a pass-rushing menace, the way that the Jets used him last year, and then suddenly was supposed to be better this year with Aaron Glenn pounding his chest saying coaching, coaching, coaching is why McDonald's going to be so much better this year, and he's had sacks in only 3 games this year. Jermaine Johnson, a player that the Jets, and we're going to get to this, probably should have traded at the deadline, looks like just another guy out there on the field. He's not creating a pass rush, not really setting the edge on the run, and now taking absolutely no accountability after the game when he's asked to stand up and explain how this defense that was once one of the better in the NFL just allowed 48 points. And I understand that they've traded away Sauce Gardner, and I understand they traded away Quinnen Williams, but the whole thing is that this defense wasn't good with those 2 guys on the field. And now what's wild to me is when Gardner went to the Colts, before he got hurt, he was looking better with Indianapolis than he was with the Jets. Quinnen Williams, in his 4 games with the Cowboys, had more pressures, 18, than he had in his 8 games with the Jets in 16. So these players are now leaving Steve Wilks and finding more success elsewhere. And I think that, combined with what some players have told me about Wilks, was that when games started, they felt like there were absolutely no adjustments made based off of what the offense is doing. That, to me, is when things just spiraled to a point where change was inevitable and change needed to be enacted, whether it was after the season, in the season. And Zach, you and I were talking a little bit about this, and it's been a conversation on social media, and I don't have this reported. This is just my opinion. We've seen coordinator changes made by the Jets over the last couple of years. Mike LaFleur was fired after 2022. Nathaniel Hackett was essentially fired last year, although they let him keep his job because he was buddies with Aaron Rodgers, and ultimately Todd Downing was named the pseudo offensive coordinator, though. Both of those moves by the coordinating ranks were made because the higher ups in the ownership level wanted to change. Woody was not happy with how Mike LaFleur was performing and wanted a new offensive coordinator. Ownership was not happy with the way the offense looked with Nathaniel Hackett over 2 years. They wanted to change, so they did. I don't believe genuinely, I genuinely do not believe that Steve Wilks was fired here because Woody Johnson stepped in Monday morning and called Aaron Glenn and said, I want a new defensive coordinator, get rid of this guy. I don't. For everything that we've seen from Woody since he hired Aaron Glenn, everything that Aaron Glenn has said since he was named this team's head coach, it's been clear to me that this truly is his show, and he has the full autonomy to do whatever and do whatever he wants whenever he wants. With that staff changes, that's player acquisitions. This isn't a general manager-led team. Woody himself called Darren Muji Aaron Glenn's sidekick. So Aaron Glenn truly has complete and total control of everything that happens within the organization and his hands everywhere. I don't believe that this was Woody meddling. I don't believe this was Woody putting his fingers in. I genuinely believe that this was Aaron Glenn looking at the totality, realizing that Steve Wilks probably wasn't his guy from the jump, and that this was just a situation where he brought somebody on because he had experience as a head coach, and he was somebody to help a first-time head coach. It was like an arranged marriage. It just wasn't working, so he made the divorce now and just get somebody else in there. Like Glenn said himself, he wants to see progress. He wants to see the culture and the character that he's been trying to instill carried out through the defenders. Wasn't happening with Wilks on the sidelines, and now Chris Harris is going to be.
So I just thought of a funny Nate Hackett story actually as you were talking about him getting demoted. After he got demoted, what was that? That was last year actually. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Feels like a lifetime ago. In 2024,
right.
After he was demoted, somebody with the team texted me, and I don't know if he was joking. I think he was being serious. I was like, oh, he's probably like bringing coffee to everybody now. He's like, actually, he brought in Red Bulls for everybody today, like the day after he got demoted.
Oh, we're going to think back on those.
Yeah.
My favorite thing about the Nathaniel Hackett era, by the way, was that the Jets hired Nathaniel Hackett, and they had an emergency press conference with Saleh to basically be like, we didn't just hire Nathaniel Hackett for Aaron Rodgers. And then it comes out after the fact that no, they 100% hired him only because they were going to get Aaron Rodgers. It's the only reason Nathaniel Hackett got that job. The alternate reality where Hackett is not this team's offensive coordinator and Aaron Rodgers is not the quarterback is Todd Downing still comes in because Robert loved Todd Downing. Like he was a huge fan of Todd Downing. Is that Todd Downing comes in the Greg Knapp role. Mike LaFleur stays as offensive coordinator, and Derek Carr is this team's starting quarterback for those couple of years. And I don't know if the Jets are any better because the belief is that the budget would have been cut to such a substantial, significant spot with Derek Carr that they wouldn't have been able to round out the team in a way that they did with Aaron Rodgers. Just a couple more things to touch upon here on the Jets stats, some stats on the Jets defense, which obviously now is going to be under new leadership. We've already said a couple of them. They're averaging 28.4 points per game allowed, which is 30th in the NFL. 337.4 yards per game, which is 20th in the NFL. I said over their last 35 points per game. To put that number in perspective, the Bengals have the worst defense in the NFL, one of the worst I've ever seen, actually. They're only allowing 31 points per game. So the Jets are 4 worse than them over these last few games. The Jets only have 22 sacks this season, which is 3rd worst in the NFL. That is so alarming because their pass rush is still their pass rush from a year ago, where they've got Jermaine Johnson, where they have Will McDonald, and they're not making any difference whatsoever. Brian Pincus, our producer for the show, made a nice little point here. Myles Garrett has 21.5 sacks this season himself. The Jets have 22 sacks as a team. And then the most damning thing...
Quinnen Williams has more interceptions than the Jets do this year, by the way.
That's exactly what I was going to say. The most damning thing is they have a defensive-minded head coach who played corner in the NFL. They've got all this star-studded cast in the secondary. They had players that they invested resources in, and Brownlee and Michael Carter before they traded him away, and Sauce before they traded him away, and the safeties and all that stuff. And they have 0 interceptions this year. Like the first team in NFL history to not have an interception through this stretch. And I saw, again, I was covering the Giants game yesterday, but I had the Jets on my tablet. They've now gone 14 games, right? Which snaps the 49ers record was 24 to 2025, I think it was, of 14 games over 2 years where they didn't have a pick before it was snapped. The Jets are now 14 consecutive games here without an interception, which is absolutely insane. Like you said, Quinnen Williams has an interception with the Cowboys already, although he did suffer a concussion, so thoughts out there. One other note here that I did see come across, and it was quickly deleted, the Sauce Gardner tweet. Current/former players that Coach Wilks coached knows he's one of the best/smartest defensive coordinators in the NFL. It's not always what it seems. He deleted it immediately. Do you think that was a subtweet of Aaron Glenn?
It feels like it. I don't really know the point of this tweet for him, but so I also see Sauce is back to his usual tweeting things he shouldn't and then immediately deleting them and thinking nobody's going to see that stuff. That's not in our hair anymore. But I mean, like Sauce can feel that way, but I don't think anybody in or outside of that building thinks that Steve Wilks should not have been fired, frankly. Maybe not. I shouldn't say 100% people. I'm sure there's some that don't, but at the end of the day, it is Aaron Glenn's team. He's the head coach. He chose Steve Wilks. He was agreeable to the scheme that he was going to run. Aaron Glenn kind of went out of his way yesterday to be like, it's his scheme. But like in the offseason, both him and Aaron Glenn and Wilks are both talking about how it was a collaboration. It was going to be a combo of their two schemes. And I'm not in their playbook, so I don't know like the accuracy of any of that. But at the end of the day, Aaron Glenn deserves criticism for this not working out too, because it's his team. In the same way that Robert Saleh deserved criticism for hiring Nathaniel Hackett as his offensive coordinator. Like you chose this guy. And I mean, that one you understood why they were doing it because of the Rodgers thing, but it still was a terrible idea. And the Wilks one, I think it makes sense on paper. You want a guy with head coaching experience for a first-time head coach who's going to have a first-time OC and a first-time special teams coordinator. He just picked the wrong one at the end of the day. He admitted that now. We'll get into some candidates and stuff like that. There are some out there. I do wonder how appealing this job is just on the surface. But, I think it is fair to criticize Aaron Glenn for this, and I think this also puts a target on his back because, he's a defensive coach. He came from being a defensive coordinator. The defense is one of the worst in the NFL. He just fired the defensive coordinator. So if it doesn't get better next year, there's going to be a lot more attention on Aaron Glenn's coaching and his ability to develop talent on that side of the ball.
So when the Jets, and we're going to touch upon, we're going to get to Chris Harris in just 1 second, but I will say, like, when the whole Saleh staff was let go, and then Aaron Glenn comes in with his defensive philosophies, and then they hire Steve Wilks, who has very different defensive philosophies. Like, I was very curious what the Jets were going to run. I'm not going to sit there and break down tendencies and X's and O's, but the benefit of, we've talked about this before, the benefit of our job is being able to talk to people within this business and figure out what they do. So, and like coaches and scouts and executives, and talk to them, have them view the film because they do that professionally, and then let you know what they see. The original thing that I was told about this defense was that Steve Wilks was going to be running what Aaron Glenn wanted to run. It was Aaron Glenn's system and Aaron Glenn's scheme, and Steve Wilks was going to be running that. Then around training camp preseason, I heard that no, they're actually going to let Steve run what Steve wants to run. They're going to run Steve's thing. That's how the season started. When the defense was so horrendously bad to begin, they were like, wait, all of these players are meant for Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbricht's defense. Their philosophies, their principles, let's let them do what they know, and hopefully that will turn around. So during the Broncos game specifically, I had a coach that was on Robert Saleh's staff text me during the games. You remember that was London, so it's being played at like 9 a.m. before these other games, and say, hey, just a heads up, that's our defense. Like, they're trying to run our defense. Steve Wilks is a man-to-man thought process guy. He's not a zone guy, so it's not working. But the concepts and the principles they're running in the secondary, that's our stuff. Like, they're back to running our stuff. Now, apparently, at some point, they went back to Steve Wilks' thing. It was a complete total. I felt like, and this is true, I felt like it was a true, complete, and total identity crisis that the Jets had throughout the duration of this season. And now it's about maybe you get a new guy in here and you can start just building it in that vision. Speaking of new guy, Chris Harris obviously is this team's defensive coordinator. Zach, if you want to touch upon this one, dude, just you were pretty adamant on giving him his roses. Chris Harris, big Chris Harris guy.
I wouldn't say. I mean, I just from conversations I've had with people, I think people are high on his potential as a coach.
Okay.
I think out of like the hires that Glenn had, I got the most positive response about him in terms of like position coaches and stuff like that. He was on Mike Vrabel's staff in Tennessee.
That's why you like him.
He played in the NFL for a long time. Honestly, if you talk to him, I think Kaz is the one that said that he's just kind of cool. Like, he just comes across as like really smooth. Not that matters, but I don't know. I just think, what do you have to lose? You give this young coach a chance. You see what he has for 3 games. It's not the best spot to be in. It's not like Jeff Ulbrich level bad spot to be in, but final 3 games with a defense that has pretty much no talent left to speak of outside of a few guys, and you have 2 of the 3 games against the Bills and Patriots who have something to play for. So, you know, a lot going against him, but I think that if he was going to prove that he deserves to be it, this is the time to do it. Like, if you can get your guys playing well against the Bills, the Patriots, and even the Saints, who look pretty good lately, and have a decent quarterback, it seems like this is the time for him to go and you know, put his resume out there and let Aaron Glenn know that he thinks he can do this job. I don't think they necessarily have to. I think it's kind of overblown sometimes, and that's probably why the Wilks thing didn't ultimately work out. It's overblown, the idea that you need to get an experienced coordinator. You know, some of the best coordinators didn't call plays, and then they did, and all of a sudden they were the best coordinators. Like Ben Johnson didn't start calling plays until he was given the chance to do it. So I think you get the most talented coach with the best mind, who has the best plan. Like, you sit down with the person and you want to know what their plan is, how they develop talent, how would they approach fixing this takeaway problem, like things like that. Like, that's if they go out against the Saints and get like 3 picks, then everybody's going to love Chris Harris. So I expect them to be more aggressive with him, I would think. Aaron Glenn's going to be involved with the game planning during the week. It should be noted. So, like, what they do on Sunday, Aaron Glenn will have a heavy hand in. Chris Harris will be calling the plays ultimately on Sunday. And, you know, like I said, he has 3 chances to prove that he deserves this job. I imagine they'll interview people this offseason, and we'll get into that in a bit. But, yeah, I think out of the people on the staff, he made the most sense. Eric Washington, I think, has been a defensive coordinator before. I don't know if he's actually called plays, but I think Chris Harris was the right move.
I'm so in lockstep with you in thinking that the quote-unquote experience card is so overrated.
Yeah.
I don't mind the failed head coach coming back as because some people are just better defensive coordinators than they are head coaches. Todd Bowles, I think, was an example of that. Like, if he gets fired here because the Buccaneers collapse, he's not coming back to the Jets, but he would be a tremendous defensive coordinator for anyone that got it. Steve Spagnuolo had his opportunities as a head coach, didn't work. He's just a tremendous defensive coordinator. Like, some guys aren't meant to be head coaches, but this whole, like, he's never called plays before. He's never done. Yeah, guess what? Nobody's done it before they do it. You know what I mean? Yep. So I'm completely and totally in lockstep with you in believing that. And I'm intrigued to see what Chris Harris does, but ultimately, like I think in season changes at the coordinating spot,
Yeah.
outside of offensive coordinator, maybe because sometimes you do just need somebody else calling better plays on offense. Defense isn't really like, oh, calling more creative plays and that. Like they're not going to change their scheme in 7 days here. Like there's 6 days really. Like they're not going to change their scheme. They're not going to change their principles. Like he maybe can dial up some unique and interesting blitzes, but I just don't think firing a defensive coordinator ultimately makes much of a difference whatsoever. Because again, the biggest issue the Jets have right now is they don't have an identity on defense. They're not a team that stuffs the run particularly well. They're not a team that pass rushes particularly well. They're not a team that forces a ton of turnovers. They're not this bend but don't break philosophy. They're just a bad defense on all 3 levels, which is stunning, again, because of what they were the last couple of years, which is why I said I feel they're completely and totally unrecognizable. You're excited to see what Chris Harris can do. Potentially, he's the next head coach. Do you have a couple names that are not head coach? I'm sorry, defensive coordinator. But hell, with the way this season's going, you never know. What you have guys on your mind? Names, just all to keep an eye on here. That as the Jets end up looking for a new.
I think the big ones that I think you're going to see fans latching onto
Raheem,
are
right?
going to be the ones. Yeah, Raheem Morris, like Jim Schwartz, if the Browns fire their staff, which I don't know if they will, but like Jim Schwartz would be at the top of my list if he became available. I don't know why he would take this job necessarily. Like if you're looking for guys that haven't been defensive coordinators in the NFL, the two that came to my mind and just from reading up on people are Christian Parker from the Eagles. He's viewed as like a rising star in coaching. Like I think he's probably interviewed for some DC jobs, hasn't gotten them. And then Jim Leonard, he was a DC in college. He played for the Jets, actually.
Bring all the Jets back, baby.
Yeah.
Bring them all back.
And he's the defensive passing game coordinator for the Broncos right now, and there's worse coaching situations to pull from than in Denver. And Darren Muji obviously has a lot of connections over there, so I think he'd be a very interesting one to me. But yeah, I'd have my eye on these coaching staffs that get fired because there are some good defensive coordinators out there, like a Raheem Morris, who is really close with Ulbrich, so I don't know that he's going to be dying to come to New York, and he might get an opportunity to go back to the Rams or something like that if Chris Chula gets a job. But you know, there's going to be some interesting ones out there. It just depends on, does Aaron Glenn want somebody that has experience? Does he want somebody that falls more in line of his coaching tree and the things he's done as a coach, or is he going to get an up-and-coming coach like a Christian Parker, like a Jim Leonard, and see what they can do?
I would say, and this is just reading between the tea leaves of doing this for a while, the NFL is very much like a pendulum. With every single team and everything that people know. You do something you know and you do something you believe in and it fails, right?
Yeah.
So what do? You did what you do and it failed, you swing the other way and you go outside your comfort zone and do something outside the box. If that fails, what do? You swing back and you do what you know. Steve Wilks was not somebody that was an Aaron Glenn guy. He was not from Aaron Glenn's coaching tree. He did not work with Aaron Glenn. Like there weren't these unbelievable like laundry list of connections between Aaron Glenn and Steve Wilks. Glenn hired him because he was a proven successful defensive coordinator before. I mean, he was the defensive coordinator of a 49ers team that went to the Super Bowl. He was somebody who's been a head coach before, so he knows how it works, and an interim head coach before, so he could help him in that regard, like help Glenn in that regard with some of the trials and tribulations that come up as a head coach. It failed. It didn't work. I tend to believe that Glenn is going to go back and find somebody that he has significant connections to. That when all is said and done, when we look at who the next Jets defensive coordinator ends up being, I think it's ultimately going to be somebody that Glenn knows. And I'm not saying it's going to be somebody who's done it before. I think it could be somebody that no one really expects. Chris Harris could be an example of that, where it's a guy where, hey, you got this guy out there, that guy, why'd you hire this dude? It's because Glenn knows him and Glenn trusts him. And knowing and trusting when you're going to be going into a very pivotal year or two is going to be so important for this organization and so important for Glenn. So you kind of had a guy when he hired Tanner Engstrand. That was Glenn's guy. He had worked with him in Detroit. I think you're going to find somebody ultimately hired by the Jets that has worked with Aaron Glenn before. Again, that is not sourced. That's not a report. That's not what people are telling me within the building. That's just kind of my gut feeling on how this is going to ultimately shape up because of how things tend to go in this league. All right, real quick, Zach, last kind of point here on the defense. Then we're going to talk some quarterback because Fernando Mendoza won the Heisman. Do you think that this defense can be fixed in 1 year? We saw it with Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich. They were the worst defense in the NFL in yards and points per game, and within 1 year they went all the way up to fourth. I mean, can that happen again? Can history repeat itself? Can, with a new defensive coordinator and an influx of talent, the Jets on the defensive side of the ball make a similar jump, and next year we're talking about them being a top 5, top 6, top 7 unit?
I mean, I say no because I just see so many holes on this
Because
defense.
you're negative and you're miserable.
But, the thing is, they did get Sauce Gardner in that draft, and they got Jermaine Johnson in that draft, though Jermaine didn't really play that much that year. But they kind of had some pieces in 21. Like, they had Quinnen Williams on the team. Did they sign Carl Lawson the next year, right? Or was that in 21?
That was that year. That was after the first year. I mean, he didn't play, though, because he blew out his Achilles.
Right. Okay, so yeah, I mean, they had JFM on the team in 21. And so, you had some pieces. Like, do they have a couple guys here? Sure. They have Brandon Stevens is fine. I think Harrison Phillips is fine. I don't feel great about Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald right now, frankly. Don't feel great about Jamie Sherwood. Quincy Williams is about to be a free agent. They do not have safeties that you can for sure rely on. I was getting intrigued by his Arie Thomas, and then he got hurt and got knocked out for the season. So he's losing some development time there. I just don't see where the pieces are. Like, they don't have playmakers. They don't have guys that get sacks. They don't have guys that force interceptions, and they don't have guys that force fumbles. And so, can they get better? Certainly. Can they make the jump the Jets did from 21 to 22? I just don't see it unless somebody emerges here as like a star that I'm not expecting. Like if AZ Thomas takes a huge leap or Malachi Moore, like they need somebody that hasn't shown it yet to be a star next year for them to have a chance, because that Jets team, they had Quinnen Williams and he had his best season in 2022. So who is going to be the Quinnen Williams on this team? I don't know that they have one.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the defense, Zach, and I see they need interior defensive line help. They need linebacker help. They need safety help. They need cornerback help. And now, because of the concerns with Will and Jermaine, you can make the argument that they need a defensive end too. And this isn't just like your average starter to put in there. Who on that defense is going to wreck a game? When you look at the best defenses across the NFL, every single one of them have players where you're like, that dude is game changer. The Philadelphia Eagles have one of the best defenses in the NFL. Jalen Carter can wreck and destroy a game. They go out there and get Phillips as a defensive end. He can wreck and destroy a game. Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean. All these players. The Rams, another one of the best defenses in the NFL with Shula coaching up that group. They've got Jared Verse. They have players all over the place that just make game-changing plays. The Jets have some guys that you can look at and say, oh, yeah, that's a starter. Oh, yeah, that's a solid player. They don't have any game changers. There are two game changers they traded away, and now they need to replace them and find them. And I don't know if you can do that in the offseason, considering they also need a quarterback, wide receiver, and some of the things they need to do on the offensive side of the ball. We mentioned, I think, two of the most underperforming players on the Jets right now, Will McDonald and Jermaine Johnson. Will McDonald, after the first game when he did 2 sacks against Aaron Rodgers, you're thinking this guy's going to be a 12, 14, 15 sack yearly guy. That was one of 3 games he has had a sack in this year. Jermaine Johnson has just 3 sacks, I believe, in the 11 games he has played this season because he missed a couple with an injury. The Jets received trade calls from both of those players, or teams calling them, and the Jets were all, in the Jets' case, they were making calls to teams about Jermaine Johnson. With Will McDonald and Jermaine Johnson, they were also then fielding calls. In fact, I know the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had called the Jets about Will McDonald, and they were like, well, we can talk about Jermaine Johnson, and the Jets and the Bucs were like, no, we want Will McDonald. All things considered right now, do you believe it was a mistake not to trade Will and Jermaine? Jermaine could have been dealt for a 3rd-round pick. The Jets wanted a 2, but Jermaine could have been dealt for a 3rd-round pick. Will was probably more in that 2nd-round pick, 3rd-round pick range just because of how good he is as an outside pass rusher. Jets did not ultimately trade either of them. They keep them both. Now, both guys you're going to have to make some decisions on regarding a 5th-round option pickup, a long-term extension, things like that. I mean, you think this might have been Will, meaning the 5th-year option. Jermaine Johnson already had his 5th year picked up, but you think it might have been a mistake there not dealing those 2 guys?
I think with Jermaine in particular, in retrospect, I think we might look at that as a mistake. Because, if you look in that moment, it takes a real big leap to trade guys like Sauce and Quinnen. And it's pretty clear that Muji did it at the exact right time, because I don't think either of those guys would have had the same value in the offseason. Especially with the seasons it seemed like they were heading towards in New York, where they were both not playing up to their best, I would say, especially Quinnen. Jermaine, you were kind of hoping he would return to form. He had shown some signs of it. But at the same time, the reason they were even willing to take calls on him was he's entering the last year of his deal next year. And you're going to have to make a decision on him about long-term, and do you see him as a core piece of this team? And they seem to indicate they did, and I don't know that he's shown that he is so far. I know he's coming off the Achilles, but, he's only been fully healthy for 1 season, and he was pretty solid that season, but he's not like a freak athlete type guy. So I have some concerns there. And then Will McDonald, like, I don't blame them not trading him because, pass rushers like that, you like having them on your team. I just think at the end of the day, Will McDonald is not a guy that can be singularly dominant. Like, he needs help around him. He needs a dominant defensive tackle next to him. He needs somebody eating up double teams so he can get one-on-ones and he can do his spin move. When he gets attention, he does not do that well. He had 4 pressures and 1 hit technically yesterday, and I looked it up on True Media. On those 4 pressures, Trevor Lawrence completed 2 passes for 72 yards and ran for a 15-yard touchdown. So they were not impactful pressures. The QB hit was on a 33-yard completion. and so Jermaine Johnson, 0 pressures, 0 QB hits. He has 0 QB hits or sacks since week 11. Like, they just have not made an impact in any way. And if you wanted to look anywhere, you'd look at the defensive line and say, these 4 guys will all be back. Juwan Briggs, Harrison Phillips, Jermaine Johnson, Will McDonald. Playing some kids' music?
Yeah, I had my Twitter open to tweet links, and I have no idea what that was. It sounded like Christmas music. I'm glad that's the clip that came up, considering what's on Twitter.
That could have been bad.
Yeah.
But
we would have been canceled already.
To the point, like, this defensive line, in theory, should be your defensive line next year, and they've made no impact in the pass rush in weeks. And it's concerning. Like, it's not like, these guys are never going to be good again, but I think they very clearly need an edge rusher, maybe even in the first round, frankly.
That's crazy, man, considering Jermaine's a first-round pick. I mean, I don't disagree with you, but Jermaine's a first-round pick. Will McDonald's a first-round pick. Like, how many resources can you continue to dump into this position group before you get the game changer? Like, that's the biggest indictment of this defense right now. And maybe it is coaching. Maybe it's the coaching has neutered the ability and the potential that we thought this group once had. But ultimately, you're looking at a group that just doesn't have anyone that when you need a play, that player makes a play. When the Browns need a play, Myles Garrett makes a play. Like, Max Crosby, the Raiders are a complete and total disaster. Max Crosby still brings it. Like, you have the guy that you can hang your hat on and say, like, how Aaron Donald used to be. Like, you knew when the game was on the line, that guy was going to step up. I don't see anybody on the Jets defense that steps up and makes a play. And we can criticize coaching and all that stuff about the lack of turnovers, the lack of interceptions, things like that. These players are on the field for every single play. Where's the guy like Peanut Tillman used to that's going to punch the ball out and force the fumble? Where's the pass rusher that's going to come screaming around the edge and swat the ball out of the quarterback's hand like we see from literally every single other team? Where's the corner that's going to read the quarterback's eyes and jump the route and pick it off? Like, where are those players? The Jets have acquired them. These players looked capable of doing those things the last 3-4 years. Now suddenly they're incapable of doing it. Like, it's just crazy to me. All right, I think that's enough on the defense. Zach, you agree? You want to move on?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So Fernando Mendoza won the Heisman. That's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
I know. Kudos to him. The race to select him number 1 overall, I believe, is completely and totally on. The draft order right now, as it presently stands, New York Giants, number 1, the Las Vegas Raiders, number 2, who are, I think, unquestionably the worst team in the NFL right now. The Raiders are remarkably bad. The Tennessee Titans, the Cleveland Browns at 4, and then your New York Jets at 5. The schedule for these remaining teams within the top 5, because that is the thing that everyone needs to fixate on. The Giants play the Vikings, who have kind of gotten hot over the last couple of weeks, shut out the Commanders and had another win there against the Dallas Cowboys. They're doing pretty well against the NFC East at the moment. They then play the Raiders, and then they finish the season against the Cowboys. The Raiders will play the Texans, the Giants, and the Chiefs. The Titans will play the Chiefs, the Saints, and the Jaguars. The Browns will play the Bills, the Steelers, and the Bengals. And then the Jets play the Saints, Patriots, and Bills. Those Chiefs games obviously look very, very different right now because of the fact that Patrick Mahomes tore his ACL and is out the rest of the season, maybe into next year. The Texans games, they are playing red-hot football right now. The Saints, which is originally a game that everyone was like, oh, that's going to be an easy win for a bunch of teams. They're actually playing pretty well with Tyler Shuck. And then the Jacksonville Jaguars with the Titans there in the season finale. You wonder if the Jaguars are going to be playing for anything. Could they be resting starters, things like that. Jaguars, another team example of a team that turned it around quite well in 1 year. What is the team or teams that the Jets need to have picking number 1 in order for them to go up there and get that pick? Because I don't ultimately think the Jets are going to be selecting number 1 overall, as bad as they are.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want the Raiders at number 1. You don't want the Browns at number 1 because I don't know you can definitively say anything about Shedeur Sanders. I'd lean towards him not being the guy, but I don't think they would go into the draft being like, we're definitely going to keep him as our guy. And I'd say, who are the other? Like the Cardinals, you don't want them. I don't think they'll go all the way that high. So the Raiders are the one that scares me because, like you said, I think they're the worst team in the NFL right now. And, the Titans don't need a quarterback. The The Giants don't need a quarterback. So you want the Giants or the Titans to get to number one. The Giants-Raiders is maybe the most important game on the schedule for the Jets in the NFL because there is a path with the Jets going to number one just because they can lose out. Whereas, like, you know, the Giants, they could beat – the Giants-Raiders makes that complicated, actually. So I don't know if the path to number one is really that simple. But you can get into the top three at least if they lose out. But you need to get to number one because it might be a one-quarterback draft. If Fernando Mendoza comes out and Dante Moore does not, it's a one-quarterback draft. You can maybe talk yourself into Ty Simpson in, like, the 10 to 15 range or something like that. But you need to get the number one pick. And if you don't, I don't know what the Jets do at quarterback. It's going to be a thing we talk about all offseason. And it's kind of crazy to think about that. The Jets are probably going to finish with 3 wins, and it doesn't feel like they have a shot at the number one pick. Like that's kind of like the degree of, like, you know, it's kind of like what Jets fans say sometimes. They can't even tank the right way or whatever. Like they lost or they won just the wrong games or whatever. Like, and again, I'm not faulting them for trying to win or anything, but it's just. They're going to have to wind up either giving up a lot to get there or they're just not going to be able to get the quarterback that they want. And, you know, that's going to be interesting. And even if, let's say, the Giants are number one or the Browns, like, there's no guarantee that the Jets give the best offer. They have the ability to do it, but there's no guarantee they give the best offer. A team might offer more than the Jets are willing to give up. And all of a sudden the Raiders are jumping ahead of them and stealing Mendoza from under them. And so, you know, these next few weeks are going to be pretty stressful for Jets fans, I imagine, because there's a lot at stake with these draft picks. And at this moment, I think the Jets are going to lose out, but, you know, you also can see them stealing a game that they're not supposed to at some point.
Yeah, you mentioned that Giants-Raiders game is so pivotal for 2 reasons, because if the Raiders are able to win, they have the chance there of dropping all the way down to 6 because of strength of schedule. Like, depending on how things work out, like 5 or 6 is where they would drop down with 3 wins, depending on what the Cardinals do the rest of the way, but they probably drop down to 5. The Jets obviously would move up quite a bit. I think it's pretty clear the Jets are not going to get the number 1 overall selection. However, if they can have their draft pick be right in that 3rd overall range, that 4th overall range, it will cost them less to go from 4 to 1 with the Giants. Because now what you need to think about is that the Giants are void of talent on that team. They need players. They not only need to have the 2nd-round pick the Jets would give them or the other 1st-round pick the Jets would give them to go down there, but if you're telling the Giants, look, the Raiders are picking 7. Okay, the Raiders are picking 6. You can go from 1 to 3, or you can go from 1 to 4, still get an elite player, because Mendoza, I think by most people think he's not the number 1 prospect in this year's class. So the more quarterbacks that go early, it pushes top-tier prospects down. So if you're telling the new Giants general manager or Joe Schoen or whoever it ends up being, hey, you can have the number 3 overall pick, that's better than the number 7. We'll still give you a 1, we'll still give you a 2, whatever else it costs, but you can go from 1 to 3, still get an elite level player, and we go up and get our quarterback. I think that is so much more appealing than if the Jets say the Jets beat the Saints, or the Jets somehow find a way to beat the Bills, who have their positions wrapped up in Week 18, and they suddenly find themselves drafting 7 or 6, and the Raiders are 4 or 3. I think the Giants are going to be more likely to still stay in the top 5, get the extra pick, get a dominant player to round out their defense or their offense or anything like that. So that's the thing Jet fans need to be watching, is it's no longer about them getting to number 1. It's about having their pick being as appealing as it possibly can to the team drafting number 1 overall. And I think they are in a pretty good position to do that, because the Saints, Patriots, and Bills is we all thought the Saints stunk, and now they're playing pretty good football lately. So with Tyler, like I said, with Tyler Shuck. We'll talk about 2 things real quick. Brady Cook, 2 games now, or what is it? When did he get in? First quarter he got in a week ago?
It was like the 2nd quarter, I think.
2nd quarter, all right. So basically a game in 3 quarters worth of snaps he's played. Completing 36 of 63 passes, that's 57.1%, 339 yards, touchdown and 5 interceptions. It's 22 of 33 for 176, touchdown, 3 picks against the Jaguars. I watched the game, and I came away thinking the exact same thing. He's not a starter. He's probably not a high-level backup. He is a player you want in your building as a quarterback 3 and someone to continue to develop, because he does make NFL throws, he does do NFL things, and he doesn't look completely and totally out of place in the NFL, especially as an undrafted rookie playing his first snaps. He reminds me a lot of how I viewed Tommy DeVito when I saw him play for the first time with the Giants, where it's like, the guy's not a fish out of water. The game isn't too big for him. He needs to learn, develop, get better, but there's something there where he's like your perfect quarterback 3. Maybe Sunday he's a quarterback 2. You think he should start the rest of the season, and do you think he'll start the rest of the season?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think he should. I don't see the point of playing Tyrod, or especially Justin Fields at this point. Tyrod, if he's healthy, will be the interesting one if Glenn decides to go back to him. But, I just keep giving Cook reps. Like, he hasn't gotten a lot of help. Like, he threw it 33 times. I don't think that was the plan. The defense was really bad. The picks, like the first one was a really incredible play by the defensive back. Second one was a miscommunication with Lazard. Not good, but, I don't think it was. Yeah. And the third one was Arian Smith just giving up on the ball when he should have, like, fought for it. And so, he has 5 interceptions in 2 weeks. It sounds like a lot. They're not all his fault. The week before, he had so many drops. Like you said, like, I don't think he's a starting quarterback. I think he probably doesn't have great arm strength, but he has a little moxie. This group seems to really like him. Like Isaiah Williams told a story about in practice how they were doing starters on starters in competitive period, and he like drew up a play in the huddle that wasn't even part of the playbook, and it got a first down. Like, so he's like a gamer, and there's something to be said about that for an undrafted rookie. And like you said, like, he's an ideal QB3, whether you're keeping him on your roster and having him be your emergency quarterback, or you're just trying to sneak him to the practice squad. Like, he's somebody worth keeping around, developing, and seeing if you can make him into a backup that you can turn to every now and then.
Starters versus starters. If you guys remember when Hugh Jackson was fired way back when with the Cleveland Browns and Greg Williams took over as their from defensive coordinator to head coach, and the Browns went on a little run with Freddie Kitchens as the offensive coordinator, and Baker was playing really well. They didn't make the playoffs, but I think they finished with like 8 wins or something like that. Greg told me at the NFL Combine that what he credited to turning it around was he had the starters and starters doing like a full-on padded scrimmages every single day in practice.
Oh my God.
That he was like, we're soft. You guys are all you-know-whats. Like, we're going pads on pads, starters versus starters. You guys go kick each other's you-know-whats. That's what we're going to do, and it helped to turn the Browns around. So it seems like Aaron Glenn's trying to do something very similar. All right, real quick here, Zach. Week 16 preview, the Jets at the Saints. Jets 4.5-point underdogs are going to chance to get to see Tyler Shuck. I am so angry continually that his name is not pronounced Tyler Show. Like, this is like Brett Favre. Like, that, there's no world where Favre should be pronounced Favre. There's no world that Shuck should be pronounced this way. This is Show. This is Tyler Show is how this should be pronounced, but it's not. He's 3-3 as a starter since taking over for Spencer Rattler. 66.7 completion percentage, 1,484 yards, 6 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Has looked promising. I mean, do you think this was a note too that Brian, our producer, Brian Pincus, our producer, threw in here? Shuck was drafted in the second round, pick 40 in 2025, in what was believed to be a weak quarterback class after Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, and Jackson Dart. Does this set an example that the Jets can find their quarterback after the first round? I personally think this is just Kellen Moore being a really good offensive mind, because you saw what he did with Jalen Hurts and now what Jalen Hurts is doing without him. But I think it's more just like, hey, kudos to the Saints for finding a guy. You can't count on this being what you're going to do, or count on this as a game plan.
Yeah, I think he's also kind of a unique prospect, because I think a lot of the reason he fell is because he's like already 26 or 27 years old already as a rookie. But he has like a lot of the tools. He's athletic. He's big. He's got a big arm. So I think looking for traits like that is smart. Usually, historically, second-round picks don't really pan out quarterback-wise. Christian Hackenberg. But, yeah, I think they should not be afraid to take a flyer on a quarterback if you don't get one in the first round, or even if you do, because it's the most valuable position. But, like, if you get to that round and just forcing it, I don't see that. And the impression I get, and I talked to Dane Brugler, we had him on our other pod the other day, and he doesn't really see a lot of, like, highly intriguing guys that you might want to draft in, like, the second round in this class. It's like the Garrett Nussmeyers, the Drew Allers, like, guys like that who were formerly, like, viewed as top prospects and have fallen off quite a bit. Like, that's kind of the bag you're digging into, and they don't seem to be the most exciting in the community, but maybe they'll help themselves in the pre-draft process. I don't know.
I'm going to assume that I know where you're going with this, but Jets 4.5-point underdogs. What's your pick?
Yeah, Saints minus 4.5, easy.
Same. Yeah, you can't pick the Jets. So the defense is a disaster. The offense has just no talent. It's pretty bad. I saw Isaiah Davis scored though. He's my guy. Love me some Isaiah Davis. You and I argued about that one a couple of days or a couple of weeks ago. So it's good to see Isaiah Davis get him. That's entirely, by the way, just because I have him in Dynasty football, and I was kind of hoping that Brees was going to get traded and he'd be able to step up there and carry me to the playoffs. And instead, I missed the playoffs because of injuries and Lamar Jackson being just a complete and total shell of himself the final few weeks this season. Anything else you want to add here, Zach, before we wrap it up? Anything else on your mind? Anything at all? How was where'd you and Samantha go again in Florida?
St. Augustine.
How was it?
Cool. It was good. It was just crazy busy because they do this thing called Night of Lights, where they like have a bunch of boats that cover themselves in like Christmas lights, and they all go along the water, and so everybody just like crowds the town, and it's insane. But I am very excited to go to New Orleans. It's one of my favorite cities in the world, best food city in the world, and I'm just gonna enjoy it while you don't get to go because I'm cooler than you.
That is true. I will say that Bree and I think I talked about this on Mailbag. I don't know if I talked about it on this show yet, but Bree is my wife and I are expecting. So we have a little baby coming on the way from Brooke, and Brooke's going to have a little brother, so we're very, very excited about that. But we've taken vacations with Brooke, but we've never gone anywhere just the three of us. So we've taken, we've gone to Disney, we've gone Key Largo, we've gone to a bunch of different places with Brooke, but we've done it with her family. Or we've gone the two of us away for a wedding, things of that nature. So I said to Bree before the next baby arrives, I'd like to take a trip, just the three of us. So we planned one. Fingers crossed that I don't have a general manager and or coaching search hire during this time period. But it's actually down near Jacksonville. It's called Amelia Island. Have you ever heard of that?
Never heard of it.
There's it looks like it's this awesome resort. We're gonna stay at the Ritz-Carlton there. Shout out Marriott points and the job and all that stuff. But it's right on the beach, has some water. We looked briefly at going to Atlantis. I did see that because they have a Marriott right in Atlantis, and I was like, oh, I can use my points for there too. But I don't think Bree feels super comfortable flying out of the country while pregnant. So we're going to do Amelia Island. So I am looking forward. That is what's powering me through these final 3 weeks is getting there down to Florida. And Bree said if I give her massage day, I can go play some golf down there, which will be nice because I have not played since Big Daddy's outing, charity celebrity golf outing in August. I have not played, which for anybody who knows me personally knows that I am basically itching here to get out there and swing the club a little bit because in the garage, in the simulator does not do it total justice. All right, that is going to do it for us here on Jets Final Drive. Thank you guys so much for joining. He is Zack Rosenblatt. I am Connor Hughes. If you want more of Zack, which you probably do, you can find him on Badlands Network with Flight Plan, an awesome podcast that he does with Tim McMaster. The second show of that's going to be coming on later this week, so make sure you catch that. If you want more of me, you can. Jets Mailbag, the show I do with Janae Coakley, is also going to be coming later this week. Make sure you start to file your questions now. You can do it down here in the YouTube comment section. We can take those on the show or send me or Janae or SMY a tweet, and we will take that as well. Appreciate everywhere that you guys were watching us. We say this all the time, whether that's X, whether that is X, SNY.TV, Facebook, YouTube, obviously the place to be. If you are not watching us on YouTube, go over there right now because you can subscribe to SNY's YouTube channel, and by doing so, you got access to all of SNY's digital content. That is Jets Final Drive. That is Jets Mailbag. That is the Putback with Ian Begley. Jets pre- and post-game live, Mets coverage, Yankees coverage, Honda Sports Night clips, all of that fun stuff. So make sure you guys check that out as well. Okay, so for Zack, one last time, Brian Pincus, who was on the ones and twos for this show, Sam Candle, Corey Palmer, and executive producer Jeff Goldman, thank you guys so much for joining this episode of Jets Final Drive. We will be with you next Monday after the Jets take on the Saints. Maybe they will win. Probably they will not. We'll see how that impacts their draft positioning.